Hello everyone. So today I'll be talking about functions in JavaScript. So today's agenda, I'll be talking about what is JavaScript function, how we can define function and the functions which can return values, what are the differences between arguments and parameters, why functions are called as a first class in JavaScript, what is the difference between function scope and the block scope, and lastly, immediately invoked function expression or IIFE or IFE. So these are the agenda for today's session. So start with what is JavaScript function? As you can see, a JavaScript function is basically a block of organized reusable code that is defined to perform a single action. Now a function is executed when someone calls the function with a proper name. And don't worry, we'll see some examples very soon. Now here, what I'm doing, I'm defining a function and then I'm calling the function. As you can see here, I'm defining a function called say hello. So any function that will define will start with the keyword function followed by the name of the function. Then within the bracket, you can say the number of parameters. And then what this function is doing is basically printing something on the console like hello followed by the name which I'm passing to this function to the world of JavaScript. And then at the bottom, I am calling the function or I'm invoking the function. The way to invoke the function is basically with the function name. For example, here it's say hello, and then passing a value which is Shane James here. So this is the way we can define a function and then invoke that function. Now, when we are dealing with the previous example, our function was not returning something; it was just printing on the console. So why don't we have a function which will return something? So what I've done here, I modified the same function, but instead of the console.log, here what it is doing, it is returning something, returning the same statement. Now, while invoking the function, I'm invoking the same way, like, by the function name followed by some parameters. And then whatever value that is returned is getting returned. I'm storing that in a variable called return message. And then I'm doing a console.log. So it will basically print the same thing. Hello, Shane James to the world of JavaScript. But here, instead of printing the statement here within the function, I'm returning the value, storing the value in this variable, and then I am doing a console.log. So now let's understand the difference between arguments and parameters. So these are the two keywords, or these are the two words you will hear very frequently when you are dealing with JavaScript or any programming language, right? So it's very important to understand the differences between arguments and parameters. So what is argument? So argument is a value that is being passed to the function when we are invoking that function, right? And parameter, a variable that is listed as part of the function definition. So if I see this example here, right, in here, I am declaring or defining a function called say hello. And this is the name. This is a variable which will store the value that is being passed to this function. And this is a function body. Here, I'm invoking the same function, say hello, right? And this is a parameter, or this is a value that I'm passing to the function. Now, if I go by the definition, which I put here, like argument and parameter, right? Name will become the parameter because this is the variable which is listed as part of the function definition. And Shudip Tadep is the argument which I'm passing to this function while invoking the function. So that's the basic differences between argument and parameter. Okay, this is another important topic. Why functions are treated as first class in JavaScript? There are reasons for that, and the reasons are mentioned in the slide. The reason is that we can assign a function to a variable. We can store functions in an array. A function can be passed to another function as an argument, and a function can be assigned to a property of an object. Don't worry, we'll see example of each of this category. So let's move on. Now, assigning function to a variable. Here, I have a function called sum, which is taking two parameters, num1 and num2, and basically returning the summation of num1 and num2. Now, see this line, let func_sum equals to sum. So what I'm doing, I am assigning the function sum to a variable called func_sum. So if you see this line here, I'm assigning this function to a variable called func_sum, and then using this variable to call the sum function. So I'm not calling the function with the name of sum. Rather, I'm calling the function with the name of the variable where I've assigned that function. So what is output? I'm expecting output should be 10 plus 20, which should be 20. And that's what we have. Okay, let's move to the next one. How we can store function in an array. Again, the same function, sum num1 and num2, returning summation of num1 and num2. And this is the array. This is the my array. So first element of the my array is 10. Second element of the my array is 20. But look at the third element. Third element is basically the function. First array is an integer. First element is an integer. Second element is an integer. Third element is a function. Now look at the beauty here. My array 2. So second element of the my array is basically a sum function. So I'm calling the sum function by passing 10 and 20, which is basically the zeroth element of the array and the first element of the array, or the index 1 of the array, right? This is the array with the array element with index 0, and this is the array element with the index 1. So I'm passing my array 0 and my array 1 to a function which is my array 2. And definitely I'm expecting this function will return 10 plus 20, that is 30. So this console.log should print 30. And we have 30. That's good. Okay, next, how we can pass function to another function as an argument, right? So this is a bit tricky, but once you understand, it will become very easy, and you'll enjoy this beauty. So basically what is happening, we have an inner function where there is a parameter called name, and I'm printing the parameter with the hello name. Then I have a return function. I have a second function where another parameter name, but this time I'm passing by name. And here I have an outer function, which the first parameter, this is the first parameter, and this is the second parameter. But now look at the beauty. I'm using the first parameter, and then basically the first parameter is a function, because I'm calling the function by passing this name as an argument. And then here also I'm returning this outer function, it's returning another function, this return function, passing the same value name. So now when I'm calling outer, the first parameter is basically a function which is inner, and second parameter is a name, like my name. So what we are expecting, so when we call this one, execution will start from here. So my function is basically a function with the name inner, and name is basically Sudipta Dev. So first it will call this function, which is the inner function. So first and pass Sudipta Dev here. So execution will come here and it will print hello Sudipta Dev. Then what will happen? Then what will happen? It will return function and name, and return function name is this one. So what will happen? Return function, it is calling return function and name, and return function and name is basically returning a value which is by name. So by Sudipta Dev. So this function will return by Sudipta Dev, which will be stored here in the return value. So when we will print console.log, this will print by Sudipta Dev. So first it will print hello Sudipta Dev, and then it will print by Sudipta Dev. And that's exactly what you'll get, hello Sudipta Dev and by Sudipta Dev. Awesome. Let's take another one. How we can assign a function to a property of an object. So here I have an object called employee. The employee name is Sudipta Dev, and there is a property called print message. But now look at the thing. Print message is not storing any value. It's basically a function. We are assigning a function to a print message, property to object. And what it's doing, it's printing welcome and then the name, that is Sudipta Dev. So when I'll call employee.print message, it's basically calling this function or executing this function and printing welcome Sudipta Dev. So if I execute now, this is what we'll get. So we see the different ways the function can be used, or different ways the function can be assigned and passed from one function to another function. And that is the reason why we call function as the first class in JavaScript. Okay, now this is another important topic that we should know: function scope and the block scope. So what is function scope? So when we define a function, like we saw multiple functions that we have defined, right? Every time we define a function, it creates its own scope. And by scope means anything that you define within that function, any variable that you define within that function will be visible as long as your execution is within that function. So function scope is basically something which determines the accessibility of the variables that you declare within the function. Correct? And what is block scope? Block means anything you write within the curly braces is called a block. And any variable that you write within the block will have a block scope. We'll see some demo very soon. So if we understood like the function scope and the block scope, I think it makes sense that we'll go to a demo and we'll see some examples. So let's go to a demo. Okay, as you can see here, I've written a very basic function called say hi, and inside that function I've declared a variable called name, which is having my name as a value, and then I'm executing that function or invoking the function here, right? But after that, if I just try to print the value of the variable which I've declared within the function name, and if I try to execute, what I'm getting a reference error that name is not defined. The reason behind is that the name is declared within this function. So what is happening when I'm invoking this function, the execution starts from here, and the moment the execution finishes, this variable is becoming out of scope. So that is why this console.log, it's not printing something. But if I print here within the function, the console.log and then the name, it will print. So let me change and execute. What I'm getting this console.log printing my name, but then here it is again getting the reference error. The reason is that name is now out of scope. The execution is already finished. Okay, let's take this example now. It's a little bit modified version of the previous example. Here we have the same function, say hi, and within that function we have a variable name. But you see here we have a function here now. We have a function which is basically printing hello name, and name is this variable, and we are assigning that function to a variable called say hello, and then we are calling the function from the function. Now here I'm calling say hi, which is basically the outer function. I'm calling this one. So if I execute now this portion of the code, what I'm getting, hello Sudipta Dev. So what is happening, the moment I invoke this function, the execution starts from here. Name is assigned a value called Sudipta Dev, and then this is a function. Here within the function, I'm trying to access name, and here it is printing hello and Sudipta name because I'm invoking the function here. Now if you see here, within this function body, there is no name variable. Name variable is outside, right? But still it is able to get that value and print that value on the console. The reason behind is that when there is an outer function, when there is an inner function, and inner function is trying to access some variable, what it will do, JavaScript will try to find that variable within that function. If it is not able to find that variable within the function, what it will do, it will go one level up, that is the parent function, and try to see if that variable is there. So in this case, when the say hello is getting executed, and this line JavaScript is trying to execute this line, JavaScript saw that there is no name variable within the inner function. So why don't I go and check the outer function, the parent function, which is say hi, and then there is a variable name. So it will be able to access name from the outer function. And this process continues unless it finds the name variable. If there is no name variable found, then you will get a reference error, like the example we saw the previous one, right? So this is another beauty. summary is that if if the variable is not present, JavaScript will go to the parent function and try to find the variable. And this process continues until unless it will find the variable or throw the reference error. Now let's take this example. We have a function called say hi, the same name, and then within that function we have a variable called name, which is having a value of Sudipta Dev. And then I have an inner function, say hello. Within that inner function, what I'm doing, I am using the same name. I'm defining another variable with the same name, but this time instead of the Sudipta Dev, I'm printing like I'm giving the value my name is Sudipta Dev, and then I'm doing a console.log. Then once I'm defining that function, at this stage, at this line, I'm invoking the function, and then I'm printing again the name variable from outside. So what we can expect, let's execute. The nested function is printing a value of the name, which is my name is Sudipta Dev, but outside function is printing the value of the name, which is this one. So what is happening here is that in the inner function, I have created a variable with the same name. That is why this name, when I'm calling this inner function, as long as we are within this block, within this function scope, what is happening? This value is getting printed here. But the moment say hello execution is done, means this block of code is done, then this name variable is out of scope. So when I'm trying to print this one, it is printing the value from here, Sudipta Dev. So that's the way you can use the same name, but still can maintain the function scope. Now, if I remove let from here and execute, then what will happen in both the scenarios, I'm getting the same result. The reason is that this time it's not creating a new variable. It's just overriding the existing variable. So name, initially it was Sudipta Dev, but when the execution starts, it actually removes Sudipta Dev and put a new value there, which is my name is Sudipta Dev. That's why the nested and the outer function both are giving you the same value. Okay, so let's now go through some examples which will help us to understand the block scope. So here, if you see here, I have a country. I have a variable called country, which is name is India. And then here I'm doing a, if I'm doing a comparison, if the country is India, then within this block, what I'm doing, I'm printing the value of the capital as New Delhi. And here I'm printing the value of the capital, right? Now, if I try to execute this portion of the code, what I'm getting is that a reference error. The reason is that this capital, right? This capital variable is declared within this block. That is why the, the visibility or the accessibility of this capital is within this block. The moment the block executes, then this variable will become out of scope. That's why when we are trying to use that variable and trying to print that using the console.log, we are getting the reference error. Now, if we make this as var and try to do that, I'm getting the value as New Delhi, right? So let is making the value, making it out of scope, but var is actually keeping the scope. So that means by declaring a variable with var will not associate the block scope with that variable. And that is the reason why it's always best practice to use let instead of var while you are declaring your variable. Okay, now let's take another example here to understand the block scope. We have two variable, country and capital. The country is India and capital is NA. And within this block of code, I'm doing a comparison. If the country is India, then I'm declaring a variable with the same name as capital and putting the value as New Delhi and then printing the value. And when this block scope execute finishes, then I'm printing the capital again. So what I can expect, let's execute. So the first one, as usual, it's printing New Delhi, because when it's trying to access this capital, it saw the capital is within this block scope. So it was able to find that variable and print that. But the moment the execution goes out of this block, this variable is becoming out of the scope. And that is why at the line number 8, when you are trying to print this capital, instead of printing New Delhi, it is printing the value NA. So this is the way how the block scope works. So now let's go back to our presentation one more time. And before going to the presentation, if you want to understand the scope in details, I have a detailed blog post about, where I've discussed about the JavaScript variable declaration, let versus var versus const. I'll put the link in the description of this video, so you can go through that and understand the differences between the scope. Okay, so we're done with the demo. So let's proceed. So immediately invoke function expression, or call IIFE. This is something that we will discuss now. But before doing that, let's understand two part. If you see the name, it's called immediately invoked and then function expression. So what is function expression? Function expression means it defining a function and then assigning it to a variable. That's called function expression. And what is immediately invoked? Immediately invoked means invoking a function right away where it is defined. So let's take some example. Let's see some example. So if you see here, I have a function. If you see here, this is a function followed by the curly braces, followed by the brackets, and then the console.log. But see here, I've started writing that function with these brackets and then followed by these two brackets. So this is the way you are telling JavaScript that I am defining a function and I want to execute the function right away. So that is why it's called immediately invoked function expression, or in short, IIFE. And when you execute this portion of the code in your console, you will find the whatever logic that you have written within the function. So for example, in this case, I've written hello world. So the moment I declare this function, I'll get hello world in my console. With that, we have come to an end. I hope you like this video. So please share and hit the like icon. And also please subscribe to my channel to get update about all my upcoming videos. Thank you for watching this video and have a good day.